Before we begin today's story, imagine this. You're living alone on a distant alien moon, just you and your loyal pup, in peace, until arrogant alien soldiers fire on the only creature you care about. What would you do? Let me know in the comments below. Hit like if you'd protect your dog no matter what, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful HFY sci-fi stories like this one every week. Ronan Blackwood rose before the first twin sun lit the edge of the rocky horizon. The dawn winds blew through the rusted ventilation slats of his cabin, whispering across the titanium floor with a faint mournful sigh. He stretched, feeling the dull stiffness in his shoulders and the old bullet scar that puckered his left ribcage. Another day alive, another day hidden from the galaxy that once feared his name. He ran a hand through short graying hair as he glanced at the flickering holographic clock on the wall. 0500 hours standard. A good hour. Quiet. Undisturbed. The way he liked it. Outside, the thin atmosphere hummed with drifting ion winds, carrying orange dust across the sparse grassland. Beyond his reinforced glass window lay nothing but miles of flat plains interspersed with obsidian boulders and faint ridges in the far distance. Isolation. Security. Peace. Movement flickered at the edge of his vision. The pup was awake. Kiro, a wiry stray alien canine barely knee-high, was sniffing the wooden crates stacked by the old mining cart. Its silver-gray fur bristled against the cold, and its four-pointed ears twitched independently as it chased a darting insect with yips that echoed faintly in the wind. Ronan allowed himself a small smile. In this brutal universe, Kiro's only crime was innocence. The creature had stumbled into his perimeter 2 years ago, half-starved, a plasma burn across its flank from some careless driller's stray bolt. Ronan remembered how it had flinched from his touch at first, its golden eyes wide with terror. But food, warmth, and silence had built a fragile trust. Now Kiro was his only companion, his only family. He cracked open a canister of rehydrated meat stew, pouring it into a battered alloy pot and setting it to simmer on the induction plate. The smell of salted broth filled the cabin. Outside, Kiro barked once, high-pitched and excited, as a cloud of dust rose on the northern horizon. Ronan stiffened instantly. Reflex. Training. Awareness flooding every cell like electricity. He strode across the room, ignoring the pot bubbling behind him, and grabbed his old field binoculars from the hook by the door. Raising them to his eyes, he adjusted the cracked focus dial and zeroed in on the approaching shapes. A Galactic patrol dropship, matte black with gleaming silver insignia along its tail, descended slowly on repulsor thrusters. It stirred up a halo of dust, sending dry grass whipping flat against the cracked soil. Around it, armored patrolmen disembarked in formation, their reptilian frames encased in overlapping dark blue plating. Heavy plasma rifles hung at their sides, each weapon longer than Kiro's entire body. Ronan's jaw tightened as he observed their practiced swagger. 10 soldiers. Tall, broad-shouldered reptiloids with scaled muzzles, glowing eye shields, and tails twitching in languid arrogance. Their commander gestured sharply, ordering the team to fan out and deploy a scanner array. They moved with casual confidence, assuming this barren moon to be an uninhabited resource pit, their armored boots crunching across Ronan's land without so much as a glance for ownership beacons. His pulse slowed. Years of training whispered through his bones. Identify threats, measure distance, calculate vectors, analyze weaknesses. His gaze flicked over their armor plates. Lightweight nanopolymer weave reinforced with ceramite inserts. Gaps at the neck joints, under the armpits, behind the knees. Standard plasma rifles with external coolant coils vulnerable to blunt damage. Thermal packs integrated into their spines for long patrol endurance. All old knowledge, filing itself away in cold efficiency. One of the patrolmen knelt, deploying a small dish-like scanner that pulsed with a rising whine, probing the soil for illegal mining veins or unregistered settlements. Another flicked on a holographic interface, scanning in lazy arcs toward Ronan's cabin but not bothering to magnify visual feeds. Why would they? To them he was nothing. This land was nothing. They owned the stars, or so they believed. Ronan lowered the binoculars. His lips thinned as he exhaled through his nose. His breakfast pot behind him began to hiss as the stew reached boil. He ignored it. Outside, Kiro was padding curiously toward the newcomers, its tail flicking back and forth in cautious excitement. It tilted its head, ears pricking at the low alien voices carried on the wind. To Kiro these were just strangers. Potential friends. The pup's trusting nature refused to imagine malice. One of the soldiers noticed it. The reptilian's helmet turned with a mechanical whir, eye shields flickering as they focused on the small creature. Ronan saw the subtle shift in the patrolman's posture. Knee angle widening, elbow bracing against his side, tail lowering in annoyance. He knew that stance. Disdain, boredom, and the desire to kill something insignificant just to feel powerful. "Don't," Ronan whispered to himself, almost inaudible. Kiro barked lightly and took another step forward, its paws leaving small indentations in the reddish dirt. The patrolman raised his plasma rifle in a single fluid motion. "Don't," Ronan repeated, the word a razor slicing through his teeth. A searing white-blue bolt lanced out with a rising whine crack, striking Kiro across the flank. The pup yelped in agony, tumbling sideways into the dust. Smoke rose from its smoldering fur. It lay still, chest heaving, golden eyes wide with pain and terror. Ronan did not move. His face did not change. But something inside him snapped with absolute silence, like a carbon steel blade fracturing along a hairline fault. His vision narrowed to a tunnel centered on the patrolman still aiming casually at Kiro's prone form. A second soldier laughed, the sound carrying across the wind like gravel grinding under metal treads. He lowered the binoculars and set them on the windowsill with surgical care. His hands did not shake. They had not shaken in 30 years, through firefights, assassinations, orbital infiltrations and silent kills across 8 worlds. His heart rate dropped a fraction as focus enveloped him like an old lover's embrace. He turned from the window and stepped back toward the induction plate. The stew was bubbling vigorously now, steam clouding upward to the cracked ceiling fan. He flicked off the heat and set the pot aside. Then he walked to the far corner of the cabin, reaching down to a reinforced titanium panel bolted into the floor. 4 quick turns of the recessed locking screws and the panel lifted away. Cold, recycled air drifted up from the hidden compartment below, carrying the faint scent of gun oil and old memories. Ronan knelt and surveyed the arsenal stored within. Compact rail pistols wrapped in oiled cloth. A folding plasma blade with knuckle guard. Collapsible stock assault railgun with spare 20mm hypervelocity slugs. His old nanoshield belt, still functional despite scuffed emitters. Smoke canisters. EMP darts. Monomolecular tripwires coiled in matte black reels. He reached for the plasma blade first, flicking the activation stud with his thumb. A 6-inch bar of shimmering blue heat snapped into existence, humming softly in the quiet cabin. He watched it dance for a moment, casting harsh azure light across his scarred face. Then he deactivated it, clipping it to his belt alongside 2 EMP darts and the silenced rail pistol. His breathing remained slow, controlled, detached. Outside, Kiro whined weakly, the sound thin and strangled. His gaze flicked to the door. The sun was cresting the horizon now, turning the dusty plains into a wash of molten gold and burnt orange. Shadows stretched long and thin, perfect for silent movement. He set the floor panel back into place, locking it with practiced motions, then turned to the window once more. The patrolmen were gathered around their scanner array, oblivious to the pair of eyes dissecting every angle of their security posture. One of them kicked dust at Kiro's quivering body, chuckling at the pup's pained whimper. The commander was barking orders to reorient the scanning grid toward the western ridges. Ronan's hand closed around the rail pistol grip. His thumb flipped off the safety. The pistol hummed softly, power cell charging its internal capacitors. He reached down, brushing his gloved fingers lightly against Kiro's old chew toy lying by the door, a frayed knot of polymer rope. His jaw worked silently for a moment, teeth grinding against teeth. Then he holstered the pistol, unclipped the plasma blade and drew it in one smooth motion. The blade flickered to life, its edge casting a blue glow that danced across the dim cabin interior. He turned to Kiro's bed by the stove, saw the scattered loose hairs, and felt the last vestige of warmth drain from his chest. He crouched down, lowering himself until his lips nearly touched the cabin floor as he whispered words only the walls heard. They just signed their death warrant. He stood, deactivated the blade and stepped to the door. Outside, the patrolmen continued their scans, unaware that the quiet human in the tiny cabin had just become the single most lethal organism on this moon. Unaware that they had just awakened something that the galaxy had spent decades trying to bury. And as Ronan opened the door to the rising sun, his eyes were nothing but steel and silent fury. Ronan stepped outside into the dawn light, the chill wind ruffling his short hair as he closed the cabin door behind him with silent precision. The repulsor dust from the patrol dropship still hung in the air, drifting in fine rust-colored sheets across the dry grass. He inhaled through his nose, sifting scents unconsciously, plasma residue, ozone, burned fur, alien sweat. His eyes narrowed as they swept the patrol perimeter. Kiro lay on its side near a cluster of crates, its small chest rising and falling rapidly, each breath shallow with pain. The pup's golden eyes tracked Ronan's approach, ears twitching weakly, tail thumping once against the dirt before going still. Its burned flank oozed clear fluid, the skin charred in an ugly hand-sized patch. Ronan crouched beside him and ran a gloved hand over the unburned fur, checking for shock responses. The pup whimpered softly but did not move away. "Good boy," he murmured. His voice was low, controlled, carrying an edge of something darker than anger. He reached into his chest pouch and withdrew a small vial of hypospray analgesic. With deft motions he pressed it to Kiro's neck, the faint hiss lost in the rising breeze. The pup relaxed minutely, golden eyes blinking with dazed gratitude. Behind him, the patrol commander barked in guttural alien syllables, ordering 2 soldiers to deploy motion sensors along the eastern approach. Their armored boots thudded rhythmically across the cracked soil, rattling his supply crates as they passed. They did not look at him. To them he was simply another scavenger hermit too weak to protest. He watched them through the fringe of his lashes as he worked, wiping charred fur from Kiro's wound and applying a field bond foam to seal the burn. His mind catalogued each movement they made. 2 setting sensors near the ridge path. 3 guarding the scanner dish, rifles slung lazily. 2 more inspecting his storage shed with arrogant curiosity. The last 3 stood near the dropship ramp, joking amongst themselves in their harsh reptilian language. His breathing slowed as he visualized his cabin's hidden arsenal. The rail pistol under his belt, loaded with 3 hyperdense slugs. The plasma blade sheathed at his thigh. 2 EMP darts clipped to his belt rig. His nanoshield belt still offline to conserve power. Limited resources but sufficient. He was a human shadow operative. Limited resources were the crucible of his craft. He felt Kiro's nose press against his hand, a trembling touch full of blind trust and instinctive loyalty. His throat tightened imperceptibly as he curled his fingers around the pup's small muzzle for a moment. Then he stood, rolling his shoulders with a quiet pop as tension settled into cold readiness. He walked calmly to his cabin door, glancing once over his shoulder to ensure Kiro stayed down. The pup watched him, tail flicking weakly against the dirt, its golden gaze following his every step. Inside, he closed the door behind him, locking it with a flick of his wrist before moving to the weapons compartment. He lifted the floor panel again and retrieved the collapsible railgun, snapping its parts together in smooth mechanical clicks that blended into the hum of the ventilation fan. He slotted in a 20mm hypervelocity slug magazine and thumbed the charging coil to life. The weapon vibrated faintly in his grip, hungry to fire. The sound was music to a part of him he had tried to bury. That part now stirred, stretching awake after years of slumber. He set the railgun down and reached deeper into the compartment, fingers closing around an old folded data cloth. For a brief moment, he hesitated before unfolding it. His old operative insignia was stitched across the corner, a stylized obsidian hound over crossed shadows. Ghost Hound. That was what they had called him. The name whispered through his memory with the taste of blood and ozone. He drew out the nanoshield belt and strapped it around his waist, checking the emitter nodes for fractures. Satisfied, he activated standby mode and watched the HUD flicker across his left retina implant, cycling diagnostics. Green across the board. He rolled his neck once and exhaled slowly. His heartbeat steadied to a measured, almost tranquil cadence. Memories surfaced unbidden as his fingers brushed the plasma blade's hilt. Cold damp stone corridors under alien palaces. Silent infiltration through orbital shipyards. Tactical murders executed with no wasted movement, no wasted breath. Faces blurred with blood spray under black glass helmets. The echo of his boots against the floor as entire outposts fell silent around him. He flicked the blade on for a moment, watching the sapphire glow pulse and flicker against the cabin's metal walls. A memory overlay painted itself across his vision. His blade slicing through overlapping armored scales of a Dreth bodyguard in a single rising arc, severing neck vertebrae before the creature could even cry out. The sensation was mechanical to him. A movement. A calculation. No malice. No hatred. Just the quiet machinery of ending life. He flicked it off and clipped it back onto his thigh. Outside, the commander's voice barked another command, echoed by the metallic clatter of equipment being unloaded. They were setting up camp for an extended scan cycle. That meant they intended to stay until nightfall at least. He could hear their laughter drifting through the thin walls, punctuated by mocking snarls in their native tongue. One word repeated often enough to catch his attention. Target practice. his jaw flexed, the muscle rippling beneath his stubble. He packed 2 EMP darts into the sheath at his belt, slid the silenced rail pistol into its thigh holster, and slung the collapsible railgun across his back. The HUD flickered, syncing ammo count, barrel temperature, and power cell levels. All optimal. No alarms. His movements were as silent as shadows shifting across glass. He reached up to the small cracked mirror bolted above his wash basin and stared at himself for a long moment. Steel-gray eyes set in a face that looked older than its 45 years. Short hair flecked with silver. A faint scar across his jawline from a vibraknife slash on New Pyrrhus. A pale white circle on his left temple where his retinal uplink implant had burned him during an overload breach 6 years ago. The face of a man long forgotten by history. He blinked, and his reflection seemed to vanish, replaced by the ghost hound staring back at him, dark hood drawn up over silent eyes. The face that entire orbital syndicates feared. The face that toppled planetary warlords under corporate directives written in quiet black ink. He touched the mirror with his gloved fingers, feeling nothing but cold steel through cracked glass. He turned away without another thought. Outside, the patrolmen laughed again, one of them miming a limp as he pointed at Kiro's still form. Another slammed his rifle but against a crate for emphasis, rattling its frame. The commander checked his wrist device, scanning territorial logs. Ronan stepped out of the cabin and closed the door behind him with deliberate calm, ignoring the sudden silence that spread through the patrol ranks at the sight of his armor and weapons. Their eye shields flickered as they recalibrated to target his thermal and kinetic signatures. Some shifted uneasily, recognizing the bearing of a man who was not just another frontier hermit. The commander stepped forward, tall and broad-shouldered with overlapping obsidian scales along his muzzle. His fanged mouth curled into a sneer as he gestured sharply with 2 clawed fingers. "Identify yourself, human," the commander growled, his words filtered through a rebreather rasp. "This sector is under active Galactic patrol survey. Your presence here is unauthorized." Ronan tilted his head slightly as if considering the words. His eyes flicked once to Kiro's motionless form. The pup's tail moved feebly, thumping twice against the dirt in greeting. He felt his chest tighten in an emotion that he refused to name. Then his gaze returned to the commander. "Cool. Measuring. Final." "My name doesn't matter," he said, voice low, calm, devoid of threat or bravado. "What matters is that you shot my dog." The commander let out a hissing chuckle, echoed by a ripple of laughter from the nearest soldiers. One raised his rifle, flicking the safety off with an audible click. "Animals have no rights here, human." "Just like you," the commander rasped, stepping closer, armored boots grinding dust underfoot. "Leave your pathetic creature to die. We have no use for weakness on this moon." Ronan blinked once, slowly. He shifted his weight just enough to ground his stance, knees loose, shoulders relaxed, spine straight. In his peripheral HUD overlay, tactical data flickered. Wind speed 2 knots east, ambient temperature -3 Celsius, enemy formation. Spread V pattern, overlapping kill zones, limited rear coverage. He breathed out through his nose, the faint cloud of vapor drifting away in the cold dawn air. His eyes narrowed, locking onto the commander's visor with unflinching focus. "No," he said, his voice as soft as falling ash. "You have no use for life on this moon." He raised the rail pistol in a single fluid motion, thumb flicking off the secondary safety as the weapon hummed to full charge. The first shot lanced out before the commander could finish his snarl of rage, a hyperdense slug punching through the alien's helmet visor and exiting in a fountain of dark arterial spray. The commander's head snapped back with a wet crack as his armored bulk collapsed onto the dust, limp as a felled tree. For a brief instant, the world fell silent except for the hum of the rail pistol's cycling capacitor and the ragged sound of Ronan's steady breathing. He pivoted smoothly, tracking the nearest soldier as plasma bolts whined past his shoulder. His finger tightened once more on the trigger, and another patrolman fell, his scaled chest cavity blooming with pulp tissue and shattered ceramic armor plates. 2 down. He took 1 step forward, eyes cold and empty, and in that single movement the ghost hound was reborn. The third soldier swung his rifle up with a guttural roar, but Ronan was already moving. His right foot planted into the dirt, twisting his hips as he stepped inside the alien's guard. His left hand snapped up, grabbing the plasma rifle barrel and wrenching it sideways while his right elbow slammed into the patrolman's throat armor with crushing force. The reptilian choked on its own breath, wheezing as Ronan twisted its weapon free and drove the buttstock upward under its muzzle. The impact cracked teeth and shattered the lower jaw, silencing its dying scream. He pivoted, bracing the stolen rifle against his shoulder as two more patrolmen fired from near the dropship ramp. Plasma bolts scorched across the dry grass, searing furrows into the soil and burning through supply crates behind him. He sighted down the rifle's flickering scope and squeezed the trigger twice in measured succession. Twin plasma bolts lanced out, striking each alien center mass. Their chests exploded in geysers of burned flesh and liquefied organs, their armored bodies folding to the dirt before their weapons hit the ground. 5 down. The last soldier near the scanner array bolted, panic overriding discipline as it turned to flee toward the dropship's open ramp. Ronan dropped the empty plasma rifle, drew his silenced rail pistol and fired once. The hyperdense slug punched through the alien's spine between the shoulder blades, exiting its chest in a crimson mist. The soldier tumbled forward onto the ramp, limbs jerking spasmodically as its nervous system went dark. 6 down. He scanned the field quickly. The two patrolmen who had been setting motion sensors near the ridge were nowhere in sight, but his auditory overlay caught the faint thudding of armored boots approaching at a run. Reinforcements. Or latecomers to their own execution. Ronan ducked behind a crate, holstering his rail pistol as he withdrew an EMP dart from his belt clip. He thumbed its microcapacitor to life, feeling the faint buzz of static charge under his glove. The two soldiers rounded the ridge path, weapons raised, scanning frantically for targets. Their heavy footfalls rattled the dry soil as they advanced in a staggered line. He stepped out into full view, arm cocking forward in a smooth overhand throw. The EMP dart arced through the dawn haze, striking the lead patrolman square in the chest. The capacitor discharged with a muffled snap crack, flooding its powered armor with a surge of electromagnetic interference. Its visor flickered with chaotic static before going dark, the entire suit locking rigid as emergency failsafes engaged to prevent neural feedback burns. The second soldier froze, eyes flicking between its paralyzed comrade and the human standing calmly 10 meters away. Ronan's rail pistol rose level with its visor. For an instant, he saw himself reflected in the polished black glass. Gray eyes cold and empty, face expressionless, posture loose and relaxed. The ghost staring back at him. He fired once. The slug punched cleanly through the alien's head. Its armored body collapsed sideways with a dull thud, blood pooling rapidly under the helmet's shattered remains. 7 down. He approached the paralyzed patrolman and crouched, tilting his head as he studied the creature's rigid face locked in frozen terror. Its 4 nostrils flared rapidly, breath rattling through fanged jaws as it tried to speak. Ronan tilted his rail pistol, resting the barrel lightly against the side of its helmet. "You fired on my dog," he said quietly, almost conversational. "Did it make you feel strong?" The alien's pupils contracted, eyes darting wildly behind its static flickering visor. Its throat worked soundlessly, voice modulator fried by the EMP surge. Its terror was a tangible thing, radiating off its armored form in waves that Ronan felt as a faint heat on his skin. He lowered the pistol. Slowly, deliberately, he reached to his thigh and drew the plasma blade. The sapphire light ignited with a quiet hum, reflecting in the alien's visor as he brought the blade up to eye level. For a moment, he simply watched its trembling eyes dance along the flickering blue edge. "You hurt my family," he whispered, voice stripped of all emotion. "No one hurts my family." With a smooth motion, he drove the blade up under the alien's jaw, through the roof of its mouth and into its brain stem. The creature spasmed once, a single violent jolt, before going limp within its locked armor. He withdrew the blade, flicking sizzling droplets of blood onto the dust before deactivating it and returning it to his belt. 8 down. He stood and turned to scan the clearing. Smoke drifted lazily from plasma-scorched earth, curling around the fallen bodies of the patrolmen. The faint scent of burned meat mixed with ozone and disturbed soil, settling over the scene like a funeral shroud. Beyond the field of death, the sun rose fully over the horizon, bathing everything in harsh white light. Shadows retreated under its glare, leaving only the truth of what had transpired. His eyes shifted to Kiro. The pup was still lying where he had left it, chest rising and falling with shallow, ragged breaths. Its golden gaze met his, ears flicking forward in exhausted relief. He felt something deep in his chest unclench, a faint warmth flickering behind the iron walls of his mind. He moved to the dropship ramp and stepped over the corpse sprawled across the metal plating. The patrol craft interior was dark and sterile, lined with hard alloy benches and weapons racks. He moved quickly through it, checking for additional life signatures. None. He reached the cockpit and accessed the comms console, fingers flying across the alien glyph keys as he navigated the patrol frequency protocols. The HUD overlay translated their labels in real time, allowing him to cue an encrypted burst transmission to Galactic Command. He activated the rear cabin holocom and turned it toward the open ramp, framing the corpses strewn across the dawn-lit clearing. Then he activated his retinal mask overlay, black glass flickering across his eyes to render him featureless. His reflection stared back at him in the cockpit canopy, a silhouette of a man clad in dark combat webbing, face hidden behind shadowed glass, plasma blade hilt gleaming at his thigh. He pressed record. "Message to Galactic Command," he said calmly, his voice a quiet monotone edged with steel. "This patrol group fired on my dog. They are now dead. Earth's shadows still walk these worlds. Tread carefully." He ended the recording and cued it for immediate transmission on a secure repeating cycle. Then he opened the engineering panel under the pilot console, isolating the ship's fusion core controls. Within moments, he bypassed the safety interlocks and programmed a 5-minute overload sequence. The console began to flash a silent crimson warning as coolant temperature readings spiked beyond redline parameters. He stood and turned away, leaving the cockpit in silence as he stepped back down the ramp into the chill morning wind. Behind him, the patrol craft hummed with the rising whine of an impending meltdown, reactor coils vibrating the hull panels underfoot. He moved to Kiro, kneeling beside the pup as its tail thumped weakly against the dirt. The golden eyes were glassy with pain and fatigue, but recognition sparked within them as he pressed his hand gently to its muzzle. The pup licked his thumb once, a small gesture of trust that sent a pulse of warmth through his chest. "Good boy," he murmured. He slipped one arm under the pup's front legs and the other beneath its hips, lifting it with effortless strength as he rose to his feet. Kiro whimpered softly, curling against his chest as he carried it away from the clearing, boots crunching through burned grass and scattered brass slugs. Behind him, the patrol craft's humming crescendoed into a rising banshee wail. A split second later, a white-hot detonation swallowed the landing zone in a rolling wave of fire and thunder. The blast lit the dawn sky, casting his long silhouette across the cracked plains as he walked toward the cabin. Kiro clutched gently against his chest. He did not look back at the boiling column of fire and smoke curling into the blue-black sky. He simply walked on, boots crunching in calm rhythm. Each step was measured, steady, unhurried. He reached his cabin door and kicked it open, stepping into the quiet warmth of the metal-walled room. Carefully, he set Kiro down on its old padded bed beside the stove. The pup shifted with a soft groan, pressing its nose against the worn blanket before drifting into an exhausted sleep. Ronan knelt beside it, resting his forearm gently across its flank to feel its breathing steady beneath him. For a long moment, he simply remained there in silence, feeling the pup's warmth seep into his skin, grounding him in a reality that was not blood and fire. Finally he stood, moving to the cracked window. Outside, black smoke curled toward the brightening sky. The patrol dropships remained strewn in molten fragments across the landing zone. His reflection stared back at him in the glass, a scarred man with gray eyes, short hair flecked with silver, and a silence carved into his features deeper than any wound. His jaw tightened slightly. His hands curled into loose fists at his sides. The ghost hound was awake now, fully awake, and the galaxy had just been reminded of what humans were beneath their smiles and fragile shells. Predators. He turned away from the window, stepping back toward Kiro as the pup stirred, tail thumping faintly in its sleep. He crouched down, resting a hand on its side, feeling the slow rhythm of its breaths. He said nothing. There was nothing left to say. The dead spoke for him now. And in the silent dawn beyond the cabin walls, the wind carried the scent of burned metal and blood, whispering across the plains with a promise of more shadows yet to come. Ronan sat beside Kiro's bed, the quiet hum of the stove filling the cabin as dawn bled into late morning. The pup slept fitfully, paws twitching against the frayed blanket as it dreamed of simpler days when life was only play and exploration. He ran a gloved hand gently down its side, feeling each rise and fall of its breathing, each subtle tremor of pain that passed through its small frame. He exhaled slowly, the movement almost silent, his mind a deep cold pool of calculations and memories. He remembered the first time he had held Kiro, back when it was little more than a starving skeleton wrapped in filthy fur. It had growled weakly at him, baring tiny milk teeth, unaware that it had no strength to bite. Even then, Ronan had felt something flicker inside him, a fragment of warmth he thought had burned away long ago. He had reached out with a piece of dried meat, watching those golden eyes flicker between hunger and fear until instinct overrode caution. When Kiro had finally taken the food from his hand, trembling with exhaustion and relief, Ronan felt his last human tether snap back into place. Now he felt that same tether tighten like steel wire in his chest. They had fired on his pup as though it were vermin, not life. Not family. His fingers curled into the blanket, the motion deliberate and controlled to prevent trembling. Anger was useful only when it sharpened focus. Anything more was wasted energy. His retinal overlay flickered softly as a proximity alert pinged against his upper peripheral display. He stood in a single fluid motion, drawing the rail pistol from its holster. The weapon hummed to life, barrel coils glowing faint blue as its capacitors charged. Through the cracked window he saw them approaching across the burned clearing. Another squad of Galactic patrol soldiers. 12 this time, moving in staggered combat formation, rifles sweeping in practiced arcs. At their center strode a taller figure clad in reinforced obsidian command armor, helmet crowned with a ridged crest that marked rank among their species. He watched them approach with silent calculation. They were coming to confirm loss of contact, retrieve data, and neutralize any threats. Standard protocol. Their commander likely believed this was a cleanup operation. Ronan smiled faintly, though the expression never reached his eyes. He turned from the window and knelt beside Kiro, checking the pup's wound dressing. The foam sealant held, though its fur was matted with dried plasma burn residue. Kiro cracked one golden eye open, nose twitching weakly, tail giving the smallest of thumps against the blanket. "Stay here," Ronan murmured. His voice was calm, devoid of emotion, but his hand lingered on the pup's head longer than necessary before he stood and stepped to the weapon's cache. He unclipped the plasma blade and rail pistol, checking charges and power cells, then pulled free the folded roll of monomolecular tripwire. 12 meters of depth thinner than spider silk, strong enough to shear through alloy or bone with equal indifference. He tucked 2 reels into his belt pouch and closed the compartment silently. Outside, the squad fanned out across the clearing. 2 soldiers advanced toward the cabin door while the others moved to secure the perimeter. The commander raised a gauntlet hand, signaling the breach team forward. Their armored boots crunched across scorched dirt and shattered crate fragments as they approached. Ronan moved to the far corner of the cabin, ducking into the blind spot behind the stove exhaust pipe. His breathing slowed, heart rate dropping to a calm 40 beats per minute. His entire body felt liquid and heavy, every muscle relaxed, coiled, waiting. The breach charge detonated with a muffled thump, blasting the cabin door inward in a spray of metal shards. Smoke and dust billowed into the room as the first 2 soldiers entered, weapons sweeping in disciplined arcs. They moved with careful aggression, stepping wide to avoid each other's fire lanes. He moved before their visors finished recalibrating to the dim interior. His left hand flicked forward, monomolecular wire unspooling in a blur. The first patrolman stepped into it, the filament slicing cleanly through its knee joint with a wet pop of severed tendon and bone. The alien howled, crumpling sideways as its legs separated at mid-thigh. Ronan lunged forward, blade igniting with a soft hum as he drove it up under the second soldier's chin, through its skull, and out the top of its helmet. The sapphire glow flickered as brain tissue cooked instantly along the blade's length. He withdrew it in one smooth motion, pivoting to the first alien still screaming on the floor. His rail pistol fired once, ending the noise in a blossom of blood and shattered visor glass. He dove through the still smoking doorway, rolling into the clearing as plasma bolts hissed past his head. Dirt exploded around him in steaming clumps. He rose to a crouch and fired twice, hyperdense slugs punching through chest plates of 2 advancing patrolmen, spinning them backward like rag dolls. The squad commander roared an order, rallying his men to close ranks. Their formation contracted instinctively, shields overlapping as they advanced in disciplined synchrony. Ronan smiled again, cold and humorless. Predictable. He sprinted left, dropping to one knee as he fired 3 rapid shots. Each found a visor gap, each dropped a soldier into the dust. The squad faltered, momentum breaking under the sudden surgical assault. The commander bellowed again, switching tactics, ordering 2 men to flank while the rest poured suppressive fire across Ronan's last known position. He moved before they finished adjusting, ducking behind a collapsed crate. Plasma bolts shredded wood and steel, superheated splinters whistling past his face. He ignored them, fingers working quickly as he anchored the second reel of monomolecular tripwire between the crate and a broken support beam. He flicked the activation stud, arming the filament's microvibration charge. Invisible. Fatal. He rose and fired 2 quick shots around the crate edge. One slug struck a patrolman's hip, shattering the joint and dropping it screaming to the ground. The second slug missed, sparking off a soldier's shoulder plate as it ducked behind a shattered cargo container. The two flankers moved quickly, rushing wide to encircle his left side. He pivoted and sprinted toward the cabin, leading them across the tripwire. The first patrolman triggered it mid-stride. The filaments sliced through both legs at mid-thigh with surgical indifference. Blood sprayed across the dusty clearing as its body folded forward, sliding another meter across the dirt before it stopped moving. The second flanker skidded to a halt in shock. Ronan was on him before his brain processed the scene. The plasma blade ignited and swept upward, bisecting its rifle and slicing through its chest armor in one rising arc. The soldier's scream choked off in a bubbling gurgle as it collapsed in two twitching halves. He ducked behind the cabin wall, breathing slow and deep as he reloaded his rail pistol. 6 rounds left. 3 soldiers remained with their commander. They regrouped near the scanner array, rifles sweeping for targets, their fear palpable even through their rebreather masks. The commander barked a guttural challenge, stepping forward to face him directly. Its armor was thicker, reinforced with reactive plating that had survived orbital debris strikes. Ronan studied its movements, noting the slight hitch in its gait, the way its tail flicked to the left before each step. Old injury. Hip replacement. Limited lateral mobility. He holstered his pistol and stepped into the clearing, plasma blade ignited and humming softly in the wind. The commander raised its heavy rifle, aiming center mass. For a brief moment, silence fell across the charred remains of the landing zone. The sun glinted off Ronan's blade and the commander's visor, painting both figures in stark blinding light. The alien fired. Ronan sidestepped, feeling the heat of the plasma bolt graze his shoulder plate. He lunged forward, the blade flickering in a blur as he closed the distance. The 2 remaining soldiers tried to reposition but hesitated, unwilling to risk hitting their commander. Ronan drove the blade into the alien's abdomen, twisting as he ripped it free in a diagonal arc that opened its chest cavity from hip to opposite shoulder. Dark arterial spray hissed against his armor as the creature stumbled backward, roaring in disbelief as its organs spilled onto the dust. Its legs buckled, dragging its lifeless body to the ground in a gurgling heap. He turned to the last 2 patrolmen, their rifles trembling as they aimed at him. He raised his rail pistol and fired twice. 2 slugs. 2 corpses. Silence returned to the clearing, broken only by the whine of cooling plasma rifle barrels and the distant rustle of wind across charred grass. He stood over the fallen commander, watching blood seep across the dirt to mingle with blackened ashes. His breathing remained calm, unhurried as he flicked the plasma blade clean before deactivating it. He stepped back toward the cabin, holstering his weapons as he reached the doorway. Inside, Kiro raised his head weakly, golden eyes locking onto his with pure trust and relief. Ronan knelt and pressed his forehead gently to the pup's, feeling its whiskers tickle his skin. "Good boy," he whispered. "It's done." Outside, the sun rose higher, illuminating a killing field littered with alien dead. The patrol's arrogance lay scattered and burned across the clearing, their weapons silent, their bodies cooling in the dawn breeze. Ronan sat beside Kiro's bed, resting one hand lightly on its warm fur as the pup closed its eyes, drifting back into painless sleep. He exhaled softly, eyes narrowing as he stared out the cracked window toward the horizon. More would come. They always came. But when they did, they would learn again what these had learned today. Earth's shadows still walked these worlds. And no one harmed what they loved and walked away alive.